Hello everyone, welcome to this mini presentation on the method of automatic wage indexation. Is that a magic bullet or a poison pill? I'm Ivan Pan, and this presentation is for fundamentals of macroeconomics at Amsterdam University College in autumn 2022. So automatic wage indexation is a system in which wages are automatically adjusted based on changes in cost of living. Every time prices go up, wages go up, and every time prices go up again, wages go up again. Belgium has been running this system for decades, and almost 100% of Belgian workers are covered, while in the Netherlands, this mechanism has been abandoned for decades, and only 1% of Dutch workers have an indexation clause in their employment contracts. With the current inflation, the merits of indexation are being hotly debated by all parties. As you can see from this slide, we have the Dutch unions who want to introduce the system, and the Belgian unions who think the system is quite good and we should preserve it. We also have Business Federation in the Netherlands who want to reject the union's proposal for introducing such a system, and the Belgian Business Federation, they think we should reform the system at least, or to abolish it. We also have central banks involving in, and also research institutions giving their opinion. So first of all, we will look at the debate and argument from both sides of unions and firms. Then we will look into the papers by these two research institutions, Dutch Central Bank DNB and KU Leuven in Belgium. So let's get started now and seeing what companies are saying. So companies first point out to the wage price cycle. We have already introduced these concepts. Companies believe that indexation will lead to a cycle which keeps inflation high for a long time, and in this spiral, wage increase lead to price increase, which in turn lead to further wage increase, and so on and so on. Companies decide indexation hurts their cost competitiveness. As both the Netherlands and Belgium are export-oriented economies, companies will fail in the market if they cannot compete with the cost of other countries, and the indexation raises the labor costs of companies. As costs is increasing and profits decrease, business can decline or even go bankrupt, and thus an increase in wage today will bring about layoffs tomorrow. This is why in the Dutch case, without wage indexation, companies are willing to offer workers one-off bonus to compensate their loss of purchasing power. However, companies are reluctant to accept indexation clauses as a structural solution proposed by union. On the other hand, the unions believe that the current wage increase have fallen far short of keeping pace with inflation. Workers' real wage, that is the real purchasing power, have fallen sharply. Unions also believe that companies are not sharing profit enough. In this case, indexation is very fair and objective due to the fact it is based on the level of inflation rather than other arbitrary wage increase claims. In case of Belgium, the trade unions do not consider competitiveness to be an excuse, as there are laws in place to limit the real wage increase above those neighboring countries in order to protect their competitiveness. Basically, the real wage increase in Netherlands cannot go above than the real wage increase in, let's say, Netherlands, France, or Germany. Of course, Belgian Union, they don't like this law, and they have been campaigning for decades to repeal it. So it seems like both sides present valid arguments. The key issue here is whether or not workers are being undercompensated without indexation. To examine this question a little bit closer, we now turn to the DNB study. It studies Dutch economy and analysis the direction of wages and prices, and also predicts the consequences of having an indexation. So first, we will look at historical. So now we look at historical evidence of the wage price interaction here in the Netherlands. So first, let's look at the pass-through of prices to wages. The effect of prices to wages estimated by the model is complete. That's almost 100% after 5 years. That's 20 quarters. And that's not the case for wages to prices. As you can see from the graph, the effect is merely 50% after 5 years. So the effect of wages to prices is not complete. So that's why we do not see a spiral here in the Netherlands in the past decades, because usually when the wages go up, the prices won't go up that much. Because of course companies facing competition, they can't just simply raise their prices. They face a lot of limitations. But one question is, how can companies manage to do that when they have an increased labor cost? So one reason for that is the profit. So let's look at this graph which show us the labor income share and net profit share. Of course, when the labor income share go down, profit go up, and profit go down, income go up. So because they all share the income of the company. So here we can see that, for instance, if you look at 2007, in which the companies was doing quite well here. So when the workers demand higher wages, the companies can absorb that increase in wages by reducing their profits. So in that case, they do not have to raise their prices. So what about the case today? Well, in a sense, unions are right. So if you look at the long-term average, today the companies are doing quite well, and they were doing quite well before the war. So it's not really that an issue that if the workers now demand higher wages, they can absorb that in their prices. We have just discussed the history, so what will happen in the future after the shock? So the Dutch Central Bank DNB predicts several scenarios for the future based on historical data and their economic model for the Netherlands. Remember, they assume monetary policy remain unchanged. So the first is default case, then we assume what will happen in the future will follow the pattern as we have just seen in the past. So in this case, the real wage will decline by 10.8%, and the wages will be growing at a rate slightly lower than the inflation, excluding food, energy, and food. That's the core inflation. Then in the second case, we will introduce unions here, which unions will be stronger than in the first case because of the high inflation. Unions will have to make a trade-off between employment and wages. That is to say, if they demand higher wages, then that would be at the expense of unemployment. So we will see the unemployment rate go up, while in the meantime the wage growth rate will also go up. In this case, the real wage will be only decreased by 5.4%. Then, in the third scenario, we have the automatic wage indexation. That's also called automatic price compensation, or APC. So in the third scenario, they were based on the HICP, that's the Harmonized Index for Consumer Prices, a way in which economists measure inflation in most European countries. Of course, the real wage will remain the same because now the wages are going in line with inflation, but we will see the overall picture of the economy will be terrible because inflation will go up to 25.9%, which means wages will also go up at that extent. And finally, we look at another automatic wage indexation, but then the index will be the core inflation, that's inflation excluding energy and food. Then in this case, we'll find that it will be quite similar to the default case. Actually, this is quite interesting because right now right now the Belgian companies are proposing to introduce
a sustainability index to replace the current health index. So the current index they use for automatic wage indexation in Belgium excludes cigarettes, alcohol, and petrol because it's health index. Why is petrol excluded? Because the current index was gradually established after the 1970s, and we know what happened back then, the oil crisis. So that's why when they were negotiating the indexation, the petrol was excluded because they were afraid that in the future there will be another oil crisis. But what we see nowadays is not an oil crisis, but gas and energy courses. So perhaps one way is to exclude those items in the calculation of index, then produce a sustainability index. Of course, unions do not welcome it, but that's certainly something that we can discuss.
Belgium and look at a study conducted by K. Leuven, their Department of Economics. So their economists began by examining the relationship between indexation and energy price hike. So we see the orange bar here. They represented the loss of households of the energy price increase, and the green bars here, they represent what happened after the automatic indexation. There are two graphs here, but we only look at the left-hand one because the right-hand one is the percentage of baseline income. The left-hand one is expressed in euro per month, but they are essentially the same. And we have just green dots. They represent the net impact without the measures. We'll talk about measures later. But if we only look at energy prices and automatic indexation, you will see that this system successfully compensates the majority of households in Belgium. Of course, there's inequality here because regardless of your income, you face relatively the same amount of losses in energy prices because all households use roughly the same amount of energy, but those who earn higher will get compensated more. So if you look at this graph only, then perhaps the firms concerned are true. Workers are indeed overcompensated by indexation. But that's not all. The whole economy is quite complicated. And suppose we consider other measures, including the measures done by governments for redistributing income, and of course, suppose the current indexation, the current high level of energy prices will last long, then we will have the deflation of saved income. So if we consider all these factors together, then calculate the net impact after these measures, then we'll see for most household is almost zero. So just compensating exactly as there will be no change in their real purchasing power. So yeah, in this sense, the workers get fair compensation from the indexation. If we consider the interaction between indexation and other government measures. But let's leave the current energy prices behind and look at the long run figures. Although there is indexation in Belgium, not in the Netherlands, in the long run, the two countries have very similar wage growth rates. Sometimes it is higher in the Netherlands, sometimes it's higher in Belgium, but overall it is consistent. This certainly hints at the similarities between the two economies. Suppose we further introduce the inflation, as we see the two additional dashed lines here, you'll find the wage growth rate and inflation rate also fit together well. But please do ignore the latest figure here because those figures are quite new and not corrected. But overall, wage and inflation, they're a good fit. Sometimes inflation is higher in the Belgium than the wage growth rate there was also higher. Sometimes inflation was higher in the Netherlands and the wage growth rate was also higher in the Netherlands. In the end, what can we learn from this debate? The first thing to notice is both unions and firms' arguments are valid, but they only present a partial perspective in their favor. They only tell part of the story. Fortunately, we can turn to empirical analysis by Dutch and Belgian macroeconomists to gain a complete understanding of the issue, to have a clear picture. This analysis, which based on historical data and economic models from the two countries, help us to clarify the real impact of the policies. Another important consideration is the decades of institutional differences between Netherlands and Belgium. For instance, the macroeconomists at KU Leuven, they argue that automatic wage indexation helps to guarantee and reasonable expectation of Belgian workers. They protect consumer confidence because workers in Belgium know that their wage will increase at that point of the year. So they will continue to consume. They are not worrying about their future income, and that's also helping the firms, and also the institutional difference in governments, because here in Netherlands and there in Belgium, the government's measures in this inflation shocks are quite different. In Belgium, the government would consider we already have this automatic wage indexation, then how to design our fiscal policy to make sure that households are treated equally. And here in Netherlands, the government would think, no, we don't have wage indexation, then how to protect the workers at this time. And we have to say that wage indexation is made one factor in the wage price spiral. So if there really is a wage price spiral, we cannot blame wage indexation for all, as we previously discussed it in this project. So there are many factors contributing to the wage price spiral. Wage indexation is merely one of them. And we also need to consider short-term shocks and long-run equilibrium. So in the short term, we can expect, for instance, in January next year, when the Belgian worker get their indexed income, there will be a temporary shock, I suppose, in the next year because of this external shock, and perhaps you will get a little bit of wage price spiral. But in the long run, it's going to be fine. So in Netherlands, the unions won't just simply accept inflation. They are not stupid. They will also ask for an increase in wages at a similar level to inflation. In the end, let's go back to the basics of inflation. Wage indexation is not the cause inflation. It just shows us now we have inflation. The real cause of inflation, back to the basic economic model, comes from the bargaining power between firms, workers, and consumers. Sometimes also about unemployment rate. So as long as those basics remain similar between these two economies, then we will see similar inflation rate and of course similar wage growth as we just saw in the long run graphs. So in the end, I think the conclusion of this mini presentation is that well-designed automatic wage indexation is neither a bullet point nor a poison pill. It makes little difference as long as it's well-designed. Of course, we may want to reform it a little bit to achieve better outcome, but overall, it's going to be fine. So that's the end of this presentation. If you're interested to know more, these are the two papers that we cited in this presentation. One from DNB, that's the Dutch one, but of course you can find English summary on their website. We also have one from KU Leuven, that's a working paper that just has been published in December 2022. Alright, thank you for listening. I hope this presentation would offer some more insight on the method of automatic wage indexation. Thank you.